The TEC-TYPE program was the first time that the federal government funded underwater exploration, particularly a long-duration underwater habitat. There were three programs actually, the TEC-TYPE 1 program, the TEC-TYPE 2 program, and what some historians refer to as the TEC-TYPE 3 program, which we'll touch upon later. The TEC-TYPE 1 program came about because of several reasons. First of all, NASA was in the infancy of the space program, and they were interested in the long-term isolation duration of their astronauts, and they figured that an undersea platform would be a good place to test that. From the Navy's standpoint, they were interested in what's called saturation diving. That is having to live under the water for an extended period of time without having come to the surface for prolonged decompressions every few minutes. So there were some very, very good research objectives being met. The first TEC-TYPE program, TEC-TYPE 1, was submerged in St. John's, Virgin Island at a depth of about 43 feet. In February 1969, 4 aquanauts from the Department of the Interior went down to the habitat where they stayed for a record 60 days. There wasn't a lot of science carried out in TEC-TYPE 1 because it was just to see how the human psychological and physiological nature would hold up during that long period of time. Their 60-day stay in TEC-TYPE 1 set a new world record for undersea living in an overpressure environment. The previous record was set in Sealab not too long before that by former astronaut Scott Carpenter, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about the Sealab program. But after 60 days, the 4 aquanauts came up. They were greeted by the Vice President, and they went about their daily lives. Again, TEC-TYPE 1 was more about human physiology, human psychology, not much on science. With the success of TEC-TYPE 1, there was a movement to do another program. Another program was launched in 1970 called TEC-TYPE 2. In TEC-TYPE 2, instead of having a 4-man team, they added an engineer and they had 5-man teams. Originally scheduled, there were going to be 11 10-day to 2-week missions spread over the course of 1970. During those missions, a lot of science was done on the coral reef, but one mission stands out among the others. It became the most famous. During the 1960s, the mindset of the population was that you did not mix males and females, even on a scientific expedition under the sea. One famous oceanographer who is very active today, Dr. Sylvia Earle, had applied to be an aquanaut in the earlier TEC-TYPE missions. Although highly qualified, she was turned down. In order to make up for that, during TEC-TYPE 2 in 1970, one of the missions was made an all-female mission. It's the first time that women got to go down in an underwater habitat, and it was the first time that women got to stay for a long period of time. The TEC-TYPE 2 mission with the 5 females stayed for 14 days. They stayed down for 2 weeks. As far as I can find in my research, this 14-day period by these ladies is still a world record today. No female that I can find has ever stayed submerged in an underwater habitat for longer than 14 days. Now, it was kind of neat at the time. There were a lot of things that the press could get away with back in those days that they can't get away with now. The 5 females living under the ocean for 14 days caught a lot of press attention, a lot of notoriety. They were featured on TV, they were on radio, they were in magazines, often in the newspapers. But what's funny is that the press often referred to them as the 5 aqua babes, the 5 aqua gals, the aqua chicks, and one of my favorites, the aquanauties. Can you imagine today labeling some female scientist who's going down to break world records as an aquanauty? At the end of 1970, of course, TEC-TYPE 2 came to an end. There was no more funding for another program, so the TEC-TYPE was moved from St. John's, Virgin Island, back up to Pennsylvania in a warehouse for General Electric, who had built the habitat. The habitat set in General Electric for a long period of time, and then we get to what some historians are calling Tektite 3. A private group from California bought the Tektite habitat for $1 with the stipulation that they would get it out of the warehouse. They bought the Tektite for $1, moved it across the country to California, and they used it as an exhibit. The goal was to raise enough money to restore the Tektite, submerge it in the San Francisco Bay Area, and use it as a training platform. The Tektite facility was eventually restored. However, they could not come up with the funds to submerge the Tektite habitat for a research platform. Eventually, as funds got fewer and fewer, the Tektite platform was cut up for scrap and sold. We lost another piece of history. Very, very few of the habitats still exist.